Good morning. I hope that your Wednesday before Turkey Day is good, that you've got a good cup of coffee with you. I suspect that some of you are about to be hitting the road going to Grandma's house, or you're cleaning up your house so that people can come visit you. Anyway, I hope that your day before Turkey Day is good. I'm here with a second cup of coffee. Um, Actually, I'm recording this the day before Turkey Day, because I'll be traveling on that Wednesday, um, and I want to reflect for a couple of minutes this morning um, on Thanksgiving, what it is. So Thanksgiving is a day. It's the fourth Thursday in November. It's been a federal holiday since the 1860s. It's been established by Congress as on this day for Thursday since the 1930s. Um, Important national holiday and also religious holiday. It's a day that we can set aside to reflect on all of our blessings, and we need to take it seriously. We need to take this idea of Thanksgiving seriously, to reflect on how much God has given you, how much God has given us. I want to read a few verses from Ephesians. Ephesians is um, one of my favorite books in the Bible. It's hard for me to say I have a favorite, but it's one of my favorites. I'll read just a few verses from Ephesians 5, and I hope that these will be familiar to you. If they're not, make them familiar to you. I'm going to begin reading the verse 15. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. And go back to those last three verses there. Addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So we have Thanksgiving as a national holiday that's set aside for Thursday in November every year. And we have our traditions. We eat our turkey and dressing and sweet potatoes or sweet potato casserole, collards, and whatever else. And we tend to gorge ourselves and eat heavily and heartily. But I think that Paul here in Ephesians is admonishing us to do something more, and to do maybe even do something different. What he's telling us is that Thanksgiving needs to be a lifestyle. Thanksgiving needs to be the way we live, and not just a day on the calendar. Thanksgiving needs to be a lifestyle. It needs to be the way we live. It needs to define us. That's what Paul says. That's the point of what he says there. Giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father. Giving thanks always and for everything. Recognizing that everything that we have is a gift. We don't bring in anything into the world. Everything we have is a gift. in what directly or indirectly from God. So Thanksgiving needs to be a way of life. Needs to define how we live. So preacher, how do you do that? I want to admit there's several things that came to mind. If we're going to make Thanksgiving a description of how we live, first, and first is we need to disengage some from social media and from media in general. We need to disengage from social media, from media in general. Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and others, they tend to, and it's actually been studied, they tend to increase our anxiety level. They tend to increase anxiety, depression. So we need to disengage from those. I'm not saying disable your Facebook account or Instagram account or Twitter, but we need to disengage some, because too much time on social media platforms does increase our anxiety and stress and even depression levels. And really, I would say disengage some from media in general. You don't have to watch Fox News or CNN hours and hours at a time. If you want to find a way to keep you from giving thanks, watch that. Disengage from the media. They make money by making us worry. If we worry about stuff, always presenting the next crisis, we are going to stay glued. If you want to live a life, if you want Thanksgiving to be a lifestyle, just disengage some from social media and from the media in general, so that you are not constantly bombarded with things that are designed to scare you to death. And when you disengage from social media and from the broader media, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, etc., you can become more engaged with the real world around you, because the real world is not in your palm of your hand on a phone. The real world is the person across the dinner table from you, or your neighbor across the street. That's the real world. So first, disengage from social media, from the major media in general. Just dial it back some. The second is to be really serious about prayer. If you want to make Thanksgiving a lifestyle, get really serious about prayer. Be intentional about prayer, about a set time in which you do it, a set order in which you do it. Be very intentional about your prayer. Be fervent. And if you need to get into a room by yourself where you can just cry, God doesn't mind tears when we pray. And if you need to fast, if there's something really tremendously important in your life and you want to fast about, go for it. But we need to be fervent and intentional about our prayer. Be serious about it. And related to that, if you're intentional and serious about prayer, keep track of how God responds. Keep track of how God responds. And there's no better way to be thankful than to always be aware of how God has responded to prayers, how God has indirectly answered them, or has changed you so that you survive better in whatever the circumstance is. Sometimes God changes the outward circumstance. God sometimes changes us. But be fervent and be serious about prayer, And the next thing, the third thing, is to be aware of how God answers, to keep track of how God answers. So, first, disengage from social media. Facebook does not need your attention 6 hours a day, or Instagram or Twitter, whatever you. CNN or Fox News and the others don't need your attention 5 or 6 hours a day. You will not have a lifestyle of Thanksgiving that way. Second, be serious about prayer. Be very serious about prayer. Third, keep track of how God has answered your prayers. If you need to make a written journal of that, do it. Keep track of how God answers prayers. And then the last thing I'll mention is when you're gathered around your tables, a Thursday, to gorge on turkey and collards and dressing and sweet potato casserole and whatever else is your family's tradition, maybe you leave your phones in the other room so that you are engaged with the people around you. So, anyway, I hope that your Thanksgiving holiday is blessed. I hope that it is blessed. And I hope even more that Thanksgiving becomes for you a way of life. What did Paul say? Address one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord, giving thanks always and for everything to God the Father. That's a great word, I think. That is a great word for us as we head into Thanksgiving. Have a great Turkey Day.